Depression's definitely a cause, but almost everything stems off the Treaty of Versailles. You know what I mean? All right. So, anyways, just to kind of start off with World War II and how it kind of began. All right, Hitler built the biggest military the world had ever seen. All right, and he started using this new battle tactic called the Blitzkrieg. The Blitzkrieg translates from English to German to lightning war. All right, and basically it's this military strategy where Germany was sending almost their entire military at a country all at once. So this way, the country basically had absolutely no way of winning. So they would go in 3 waves. First, they would send their Luftwaffe, which means Air Force, okay, and they would bomb everything like crazy. Right? Then they would send the second fastest vehicle they had, an entire brigade of tanks. And then lastly, the infantry or foot soldiers would come in and clean everything up, take over the cities, and that's how they would occupy countries. Most of the time, countries would just immediately surrender if they did not have any sort of military to do this. But this was the first time that we ever saw attacks on this scale, and it's going to cause them to start to get control of many of the countries in Europe very, very fast. With their Air Force, they would definitely focus on specific targets, so any sort of factories, any important buildings in towns, military bases, and if you were to look up in the sky when this was happening, it wasn't like you saw 2 or 3 planes. You would look up and see hundreds of planes in the sky doing this all at once. So the whole idea behind the Blitzkrieg was it was an overwhelming, enormous attack that would send as much military personnel as possible. Yes, Shay?
Didn't people were getting invaded, wouldn't that put Germany at risk for being invaded?
It would. However, there wasn't really anybody in the world who was capable of the time at having that invasion. Maybe the United States could have, but they wanted to stay isolated and not get involved in the war. And France and England, the 2 countries closest to Germany that could actually have an impact, were both still in the Great Depression. They're struggling financially. And they've just been doing that policy of appeasement for the past couple of years, which you didn't learn about, where they were basically letting Hitler bully them around.
Okay. That's kind of like in the video, right?
Yeah.
I feel like it was state to live in at that time. It's just war.
Yeah, probably.
It would not have been nice. Can I move forward?
Would you rather live at that time or the late 80s?
Am I rich in either of those time periods?
He's just a regular person.
I'd rather that time period.
I don't know. Alright, the first place that Hitler uses the Blitzkrieg is in Poland, which, remember, we talked about yesterday is the official start of World War II. What's interesting, and what a lot of people don't realize, because later in the war they become enemies, is at the beginning of World War II, Hitler and Stalin were allies. So the Soviet Union was allied with Germany. And they're going to do the invasion of Poland together. So on the east side of Poland is the Soviet Union. On the west side of Poland is Germany. They both share a border. All right? And they're basically just going to both invade from either side. And within 4 weeks, Poland is going to fall. Half of it going to the Soviet Union, the other half going to Nazi Germany. And they used that Blitzkrieg tactic where they sent all the planes and all the tanks and all the infantry. And Poland's army did not stand much of a chance up against those 2 huge world powers. So very quickly, it's going to fall. Like I said before, we're within 4 weeks. And then the United Kingdom and France both declare war on Germany. They said, we can't wait any longer because Hitler's just going to get more and more powerful, and we're not going to be able to compete if we wait any longer. So it's now 1939. World War II has officially started.
Not yet.
So
Why is the US involved yet?
we don't get involved until 1941.
What box is it going?
Huh?
First Blitz.
First,
hmm
please-
Does anyone know the next places they go?
France.
Second
Poland.
Poland,
France.
They were just
France,
Apple.
Austria, France.
USA,
Oh, Benelux.
Switzerland.
Benelux.
Rhineland. Denmark.
They go to two places next. In first they're going to go to Norway, which is going to fall in 2 weeks. So that Scandinavian country, right up here, that falls in 2 weeks. It's not very big. And then just to Germany's north is Denmark, this little country up here. That's going to fall in just 2 hours.
Wow.
So they see the military coming through. They're like, "We're not going to mess with you. We'll be part of Nazi Germany. Please don't kill us."
sorry.
Yes.
Here's my money.
So if you guys look, just follow the arrows.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Okay. So Norway, to Denmark, and then after that it was the Netherlands and Belgium.
But where do
You guys don't. It's okay if you don't put the Netherlands and Belgium because they kind of do that on the way to France. So next it'll be France. Yes.
When they take over all this land, like, what do they do with it?
So that's a really good question. So basically, it becomes an extension of Nazi Germany. All right, so they start using all the same propaganda they're using in their countries. They have Nazi soldiers walking through the streets, making sure that there's nobody who's trying to revolt. And basically, they're trying to start brainwashing the populations of these countries too. Okay. In Hitler's eyes, it just becomes an extension of his country. Historically, we really don't look at it that way because, from our perspective, the American perspective, right, we were fighting against these people, so we still considered all those other places countries that were under occupation, Nazi occupation. Okay. So next he's going to invade France, but the problem with invading France is right along the French-German border is something called the Maginot Line. The Maginot Line is just a series of fortified defenses that's all across the border. So it's basically pretty stupid to try to invade right through there, right? It would be the hardest place to go. All right, that's only going to leave a few places for him to attack. One is the Ardennes Forest, which is a pretty thick and heavy forest. It would be hard to move any sort of military equipment through there, right? Maybe infantry could go there, but it would be hard to move your tanks, and basically you'd have to do a lot of movement on foot. To look at it on a map, here's the border of Germany and France here. You can see the Maginot Line extends across the whole thing. Here's the Ardennes Forest right here, where you see this dotted line. And since France and England are expecting an invasion like they did in World War I, do you guys remember the Schlieffen Plan?
Yeah.
Okay, they're expecting that same invasion, so they're fortified along this edge where they've put most of their military. Okay, so they're what? So France and England put their military right along this line up here to the north that extends from the English Channel all the way to the end of the Ardennes Forest. The purpose of this, they think they've basically made it so that there's no way that Germany could just blow right through there and take over France. However, and the Maginot Line. So I showed you some pictures. The Maginot Line, like I showed you before, is this really heavy defensive position. It was built in the 1930s because they started to worry about this German invasion. There were earlier defenses there, but they kind of revamped it in the 1930s. And the Germans decide, you know what, the best thing for us to do is to invade through that Ardennes Forest. And basically they take all these new tanks called German Panzers. They called them Panzer divisions when there was a big group of tanks. and they basically just drove over all the trees. They put bulldozer fronts on the front of the tanks, and it took a long time, but they just drove right through the forest. There was no defenses there. Why would that be a problem with the way that Great Britain and France defended against that if they just go right through the forest? What happens to their forces?
They don't.
Not that they're dead. You've got some in the north and some in the south. So what does that mean? They're split up, right? So now they can't have any sort of unified attack, and they're separated from one another. This is important because they're facing what is the biggest army the world has ever seen. So since they avoided the Maginot Line and they avoided all the British and French troops, now they're divided and they could focus on going to one or the other. It's kind of like a surprise attack. It seemed like the dumbest place for them to go would be the Maginot Line, and since they're thinking about the Schlieffen Plan for World War I, and that they would do the same thing again, they kind of fell victim to their, their own beliefs. Can I go forward?
No.
Did we learn this last year?
Might have.
Yeah,
Can I go?
almost. Or not.
Alright, so you guys heard of that movie Dunkirk?
Yeah, I remember.
Alright, so basically, with all the troops divided, Germany heads north and starts attacking all of the British soldiers. This is bad because now Great Britain is completely surrounded by all the tanks and all the incoming infantry. They're getting bombed by the Luftwaffe, and they're really kind of getting picked apart. So they start to head towards the English Channel and get up there as far north as possible to hopefully be rescued. They're just pulling out of continental Europe and saying, there's nothing we can do for France at this point. We didn't expect them coming through the Argonne Forest, and if we stay here, we're basically all going to lose. So the English are going to try to escape, and what's interesting is they know that if they send all of their entire Navy fleet, that the German Air Force is going to bomb all their ships and sink them. So rather than sending just their Navy, they also send... Can I speak, or...
That's during D-Day. Not D-Day.
That's not the time. You'll find out during homeroom. It's not going to be a big deal.
D-Day is no, as in the beach and stuff.
Oh, no, that's not until 1944, so we still have 4 years. All right, so listen up. So anyways, not only they send their Navy ships, but anybody who owned a ship at all, like if you were a fisherman in England and you owned a big fisherman ship, you also sailed across the ocean to go save these 300,000 soldiers. So it's amazing because if you were to look at the English Channel, which is about 15 miles away from Dunkirk, it's like a 15-mile sea journey, you would see all of these boats that weren't just big Navy ships trying to save them. At the time, Winston Churchill called for it and said this was the only way that we could save all these soldiers and still have a chance in the war. So he actually called over the radios, anybody who has a ship, get to Dunkirk and help save our soldiers. So that's why they made an entire movie about it. Have any of you guys seen that Dunkirk movie?
Yeah.
A few of you? Okay, we're going to watch the preview just so